Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Red Path. It is Dara and Brian here with you today, and we've got more discussion around the new Pariah Nexus competitive packet, specifically how world leaders are going to be doing in this new meta. What we're going to be talking about today is how we feel the world leaders are going to perform in this new sort of competitive environment, what the tough matchups are going to be that we think we're going to be facing, especially at the top end of tournaments, and then we are going to run through two different army lists, one of which Brian has constructed and one of which I have constructed. Keeping with the reoccurring theme of the channel, Brian is on an Angron based world leaders list, and I am on a non-Gron based world leaders list. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Dara. A lot of excitement from yesterday. Uh, I feel like I've finally gotten to the point where I've digested 90% of the changes. There's even, like we said, a few that missed us that we caught again. Some really excite me, like not being able to shoot wings anymore. That's pretty cool. I think that's a really cool change. At times I got tired of people shooting at anger on sword and I just roll my eyes. Well, that's gone, and I'm happy that's gone. So I'm really excited to be here playing around with new lists, new ideas. Like I said, that awkwardness we had from the last point slate's gone. So like it's a brave new world and getting that like extra like 20, 30 points back actually really opened up list building. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, I think it did. I mean, you and me, we've been building lists today. Like, we got some stuff cooked up. I think, especially on your end, we've got a really spicy Angron based list, which people probably honestly won't be expecting, I would say. But let's shift our focus to how we think world leaders as a faction are gonna be in this current meta. Kind of a broad top down, given the information that we now know about kind of like, all the missions, all the special rules, and all the balance slate stuff. Because for me, right now, I'm actually feeling like this is maybe the possibly the best meta that the world leaders have been in since 10th edition began. How are you kind of feeling about this one?
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree because I feel like we've definitely been stronger as an army before. I don't think anything will get us close to where we were with Favorite of Khorne and old Berserker Glaive just toppling whatever it touched. But I really feel like the power level of the game has come down significantly. Back when we were as strong as we were, right, we were talking triple night spinners. We were talking like billion accursed cultists and unkillable Necrons. That's all gone now. Like, those are all relics of the past. And at this point, there's no bully, I feel like, right now. I feel like this data slate did a good job of getting rid of all of the meta bullies, and everybody's playing a really fair game. And that is a game that world leaders want to be playing. I think we play very bad in the sandbox with other fair armies. Like, we are absolutely the bullies of the sandbox when people try to play this game. Like they come into a game with a game plan. World leaders absolutely throw a wrench into that game plan, which is like part of the army design. That's not a bad thing. That's just keeping people on their toes, making people play different, which makes for better game experiences. But I feel really good about where we are in this current meta. A lot of our monsters kind of got knocked down a peg, and just game balance is perfect.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the nail on the head there. With the fact that like the largest predators that we were kind of facing into, the most recent, I suppose, meta that would be the likes of orcs. Amongst others, like Krons were obviously quite relevant. T-Sons were very relevant, especially at that higher level. They've all been taken down a significant peg while we have not. And I think you're right in the sense that the whole power level of the game has decreased to the fact where we are now, everyone is mostly playing fair armies. And like you rightfully said, a pressure melee army in a fairer meta tends to perform much better. And that looks to be kind of where we're heading in. There are still some armies which I think we are going to struggle with. But like just touching on, we'll say, the data on StatCheck's metadata dashboard. We were just looking at it before the stream, and like filtering out for the top 75% ELO players, which is kind of where you and me are respectively. The games that we seem to be struggling with at that higher level of World Leaders gameplay are Necrons, T-Sons, Grey Knights, and Sisters. Now, I definitely don't think we're going to be struggling as much into T-Sons anymore, and Necrons, I think, feels a little bit easier, minorly easier, but still okay. Grey Knights and Sisters, though, are two of the armies which I think are still going to be quite relevant at that upper end of competitive play. Like, if you're gunning for a 4-1 finish or a 5-0, you want to win your tournament. I think it's pretty fair to say that you have to factor in at some point you are going to play either Sisters or Grey Knights because they still seem to be quite powerful. Um, I know Sisters has taken like on average a 25% increase for most of their armies. Like quite a lot of them went up around 400 or 500 points, but there's still a lot of jank in those armies, and it remains to be seen which is going to come out as the most popular detachment. If it's going to be, Penitent Host or any of the other ones, I think Penitent Host coming out on top would be pretty good for us because it's just like a melee brawl, and I would like to play that game a little bit more than being burned to death by a million flamers, which was like Thousand Sun Simulator. But yeah, what do you think about the top dogs right now? Like, who do you think is going to rise up, and who do we have to be watching out for?
So I think there's two things here. I think we're going to see a lot more armies being played, or sorry, a lot more of certain armies being played. Not that I think they will be top dogs, but I think it'll be genuinely a good thing for us. I think Custodies are still a fantastic matchup for us, and I think the buffs that Custodies got, there's a huge Custodies player base out there. I think we're going to see a lot more Custodies. I think we're still going to see a lot of Orc players out there, and I think we're going to see a lot of Tyranid players out there. Now, between those three armies, that makes up a significant portion of the player base, specifically with like your Nids and your Custody players, both of which fantastic World Leader matchups have played correctly. So I'm excited to see that. That will definitely boost our numbers up. Now, for our top contenders in the meta, yes, Grey Knights are going to be one of the harder ones to play into and play into well, but they got hit. They are more manageable. Their high toughness monster spam list really doesn't work anymore. Like they had to
Yeah, we
lose
don't
a
really
full
have to worry
body.
about the like Redeemer
No.
Hull spam list, which is probably one of the more frustrating versions of the Grey Knights for us to play into, I would say.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to play into the other like the more infantry-based variant of Grey Knights, which is depending on the pilot, that can be rough. Sisters, I think in the previous meta, were quite hard for us to beat just because they had so much trash. They could screen us, they could suffer and sacrifice, um, all sorts of shenanigans that really just let them trade up into a super well, outscore us. And while that style of Sisters, I think, is kind of dead, we're back to more of an elite Sisters army. I think it's going to be harder for different reasons. I They have a lot of scary combos going on. We're not going to go into depth too much now, but they're definitely going to be an army to keep your eye out on. They hit hard, they're fast, and they still have jank that makes them durable. So keep an eye on those two. Thousand Suns. Hopefully, we take a step back. We won't see as much, but I think a lot of the lower armies are going to rise up, and like that whole like, yeah, we are going to be bullying a lot of those new armies that are going to be rising up, and I think we'll find a good spot in the meta after that shift.
Yeah, for sure. And then obviously we have the new missions and all the mission special rules
Yep.
as well. Like a lot of the more, so we've seen the Pariah tournament companion now, which does kind of favor the battle line specific mission rules, of which some of them are very good for us. The likes of prepared positions, obviously, very very good. And there's a whole bunch of good ones in there as well. I think the one Fog of War comes up a couple of times, which is pretty good for us too. The one where you get cover and don't no one can use core stratagems in round one. And obviously, any of the ones where you can advance and do actions are incredibly good for us, particularly when we can auto 6 advance battle line units and get them to do actions on far flung points. So I think the mission rules in general are more beneficial towards us than the Leviathan ones are. And then
100%.
obviously the new deployment zones are like much better, right? Like, we can close that gap much quicker, which is quite hot, I think.
A lot of those deployment zones, we got 4 inches closer to our opponent, which
Which is
is very scary.
yeah.
That makes it like when you're rolling for your advance and charge, like you went from like, oh, I need to make a 5 or 6 to make this a reasonable charge to I need a 3 or a 4 to make it a reasonable charge, and that's
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
nicer.
Yeah. It's
Um,
super
uh,
good.
it's worth mentioning that like I think a lot of the armies that are going to rise up to or perform well in this meta are the ones with really strong battle line options. I know all of my Space Marine friends are complaining a little bit because they're like, oh, I have to play Assault Intercessors now. And they're like, they're okay, they're good. They're like, but they're not great. It's not where Space Marine armies want to be spending points necessarily. For World Leaders, we don't have that problem. We have no issue shoving Jackals in the middle of the board, and our Berserkers are already in the middle of the board.
Yeah. It's
So
definitely favorite. And I think in my opinion, the meta is the developing meta anyway is going to heavily focus on MSU melee. I think is going to be very popular, or fast gun armies, the likes of, we'll say, breacher spam for Tau, or things like that. I think those are both going to be two very common archetypes, as well as durability builds. But durability builds seem to have kind of taken a little bit of a hit across the balanced data slate here between bully boys and rates getting a points increase and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's going to be harder to do durable builds, and with like Nid's melee getting pushed up, they're going to start to come into the picture. Penitent Host for Sisters, a very prominent melee detachment, looks really good. Templars now kind of having, with Ironstorm being gutted, people might be like, time to grow a few brain cells and like activate Righteous Crusaders. That's going to be a really popular meta one. Blood Angels are still going to be very, very good.
Yes.
So I think right now, us included, and also, of course, Demons, right? Like one of the primo melee armies in the game are definitely going to be a lot more relevant now. So I think it's going to be a very melee centric brawler style meta, which is kind of like perfect for World Eaters. It's looking good, basically, is kind of what we're saying here. Like it's actually looking quite positive for the World Eaters, and I think if you're kind of if you've been struggling this year with World Eaters and performing at events, now might be a good time to pick them back up again and say like, hey, gonna run these boys out. But why don't we shift to some lists? Because we've written two lists. I've written a non-Angron based list, and Brian has written an Angron based list. We're gonna go through these, why we think they're good, what kind of tech they have that we actually like about them, and how they're gonna be in Pariah and stuff. And we're going to switch to TTS for this as well. Brian has loaded up both the lists so that we actually have a little bit of a visual for it too. So on the left here, we have Brian's Angron based list, which this list, when we went through it, this is the closest I've come to abandoning Non-Angron, because this list looks so fun and so good. So why don't you take it away and take us through it, Brian?
Yeah, so this is actually a take from my personal take from evolved out of Ryan Bell's old list, and Ryan Bell's old list was something that him and I worked on together, and that evolved from a list we played way back in like December of last year. Now, I think I mentioned it in the stream that we did yesterday, that with the points drops that we got from the last two data slates, we're now around about where we were like on release post first data slate. So most of your army is going to come in around that spot. I am on two 3-man squads of regular 8-bound, one 6-man squad of regular 8-bound, one 6-man squad of exalted 8-bound, two squads of 10 jackals, one squad of 10 berserkers with a master of executions and a rhino, a wardog carnivore, and Angron. Now there's a few weird things going on here. Firstly, I have a 6-man 8-bound squad. That kind of just spawned out of me having an extra 140 points, not really wanting to bring a demon engine in, wanting more infantry, and it kind of just promoted itself, a 3-man squad, into a 6-man. And I was like, well, that's pretty nice, but I've never had two 6-man 8-bound squads before, and it got me thinking. I was like, wait, if I already have a 6-man 8-bound squad that's going to be scouting up, and I don't need to worry about keeping them back for their wound rerolls because I got that in plenty, what are my exalted 8-bound doing? Like, do I really need to be starting with 18 8-bound on the board? Probably not every game. So that gives me a massive brick to throw up into reserves as a boogeyman strategic rapid ingress threat that I can bring down later in the game. And if I have my exalted 8-bound up in reserves, what am I doing with Invocatus? I know, heresy, right? You're playing a mass 8-bound spam list, but you're not playing Invocatus? That is correct. I am planning on potentially playing all 12 8-bound starting on the board, which is plenty Alpha Strike when you count Angron too. And I ended up dropping Invocatus because I just felt like he wasn't really adding too much value to the list in the moment in time. And one thing that caught my eye at 140 points is like, well, I could have a Mauler Fiend, or people keep talking about carnivores being like an argument between a Mauler Fiend and a carnivore, right? Well, carnivores have the battle line keyword, which in Pariah is extremely relevant. It's not something I should say. You shouldn't be building your lists, if you're a world leader player, most of the time we're checking that box enough for battle line. But this was something that made me definitely say, okay, now there is an argument to be had over a 50-50. Like, it's enough to tilt it to a 55-45 for me to at least try it
Especially
out
with
over
tank
the Mauler
shot for the
Fiend.
Mauler, right, becoming less good, you
Correct.
know, and
And
high OC on that carnivore too is something that's just like very, very good.
and with the pivot rule and stuff like that, maybe the Mauler Fiend can get a little clunky to move. I still think it's fine, but the without advance and charge, the carnivore moves 14 inches and rerolls its charge, which is incredibly consistent. The indirect gun is kind of relevant, not really. Like it'll clean up a couple small units, maybe get you a couple extra wounds here and there. But that's kind of the idea. Also, I think if I didn't mention it, to spawn an Angron.
And hey, look, if you're
Um,
playing prepared positions, a heroically intervening carnivore seems
it's pretty
pretty
good.
good.
Pretty good.
It seems real good, actually.
So the list is
Um,
short, simple, sweet. It's a glass cannon, hit hard. It is going to play the middle of the board very well. And a lot of the missions, like I said, favor battle line, and having that fourth slot be a carnivore be battle line seems kind of gross.
yeah.
So that's where I'm at in my head right now. I'm probably submitting this list for a GT coming up here soon. Um, Again, like I said, this evolved out of another list. I was originally planning on playing something similar to like Ryan Bell, but I think this is like my own crazy spin on things. I'm kind of becoming unhinged now that, like I said, I got my golden ticket, so I'm not striving
It's a
for that
matter of
win.
time.
Like,
After a man joins the red path, you know, it's only a matter of time before they start to feel like my aura affecting them, and they're just like, you know what, maybe I will start putting weird stuff in my list. And before you know it, you're dropping Angron and you're starting to consider a Knight Atropos or something.
oh no,
Um,
okay.
but yeah,
Well,
I think it's awesome. Like the carnivore as an early game objective flipper, when you have this much stuff rammed behind it, is like, okay, cool. It takes the heat off Angron as well. Also very cool. It's OC6 on any of the battle line missions, like you know, stalwarts or swift action, advance and do an action. Which means you could like have this guy fly out, do an early game terraform or something crazy like that, or you know, early game cleanse, blah blah blah. Um, he is like his own mini toolbox when you have a lot of other units which are just going to rip and tear. And like, damn, like, you know, just damn, it's like such a cool list. It's really really cool. Has like, it's not really, I would say, quite like anything that we're kind of seeing from Angron based lists at the minute. You know, you sort of see them and you're like, okay, I know what this is going to include, but like we're missing key elements like Invocatus. We've got a crazy amount of 8 bound in here, and then we just have this carnivore walking around as well. It's like, it's a very interesting adaptation of what was working before and then changing it to kind of like what is going to work in Pariah.
I agree. And like I said, I'm just trying out not having Invocatus for once. And I think the Alpha Strike is still strong. If your opponent presents an opening, turn one, you can still ram 12 8-bound straight into their face. Carnivore can probably join in too because it moves 14 inches and we are closer than ever to our opponents. So
Yeah,
gonna have a lot of
awesome.
fun with that one. So we'll move on to yours now here, Dara. I'll
Yeah,
let
cool.
you talk us
Cool, cool,
through the
cool.
list.
So we're back at Non-Angron. Shocker. This list is actually not at all close to what I was playing at Bristol. This is an evolution of the Non-Angron list I played at Manchester. The reason I'm moving away from the Bristol one is not because the Bristol list was bad. I think that list was very good for what it was in the meta at that time. But the points that that list gained actually just made it very awkward to find something suitable to put into that list. So I couldn't mess around with it too much. And what I was doing, I honestly wasn't happy with. It didn't feel like I was getting a meaningful buff from that. So I kind of went back to my Manchester list and I said, all right, what is in this list? Is it more relevant? And that list has changed around a lot. That used to have one Exalted 8 bound brick and three-man 8 bound squads. That has now changed. I've gotten rid of all the 8 bound squads and I've put in a second Exalted 8 bound brick with the points that I had left over, which is pretty significant. Moving some other stuff around in the list also gave me an extra 15 Khorne Berserkers. So we're now up to a total of 25 Khorne Berserkers, so two 10-man squads. One of them is led by Khorne, one of them is led by Glavemo, and there's a 5-man squad running around as an early game objective flipper. We have a Rhino for them to truck around inside. And then in the other characters, we have Invocatus as well, because this list does benefit an awful lot from Scout. And we have the Demon Prince with the Helm again for the half damage and the Invuln aura, which as I was saying, moving into a mid-game brawler type of melee kind of environment, that becomes extremely valuable when you're running around with 12 Exalted 8 bound, who with a 4-up, 5-up Feel No Pain seem pretty oppressive. Um, we've got 2 spawn in there as well, and we have a grand total of 30 Jackals, one 20-man squad and one 10-man squad. The 20-man squad is back, the Jackal Tar Pit, because you do your 1 CP, go to ground, or you do it for free if you're playing on prepared positions. And when you're next to the Demon Prince, they've got a 4-up invuln, and if you've got your Feel No Pains up, they've got a 5-up Shrug as well. So again, similar to Brian's list, this has plenty of battle line. In total, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units of battle line, which is really, really nice. You can do lots of stuff with that. The Demon Prince kind of loves this new meta. I think he just walks into the middle of the board and he's just like, yep, I'm going to do a whole bunch of actions because I can't really do a lot of damage, but I'm going to be really, really annoying. And yeah, it kind of just functions like similar to a lot of my other non-Angron lists where it's just like a ton of pressure. I really like that this version of the list has 2 10-man Berserker squads, because I did find that I was like running out of Berserker steam in Manchester, you know, especially like my deep love of the Blood Surge move is kind of like really pushed when they're 10-man squads. It just makes it so much better. So I think this is going to be fun. I think it's going to suit the meta quite well. I think it actually has a lot of good answers to Penitent Host Sisters, because you just put the 20-man Jackals out front and you have the Prince nearby, and they can send in Repentia at AP whatever, and it doesn't matter because I'm still on 5s and 5s. So they will be able to absorb that quite well and then retaliate also quite well. So I think that they can be quite nice. They have a lot of like interesting toolbox uses. I did find them very effective before, and I think they will continue to be effective. But yeah, it's a fun list. I think it's gonna do quite well. I've got an RTT at the end of the month, which I'm going to probably bring this one to, I think, and I'm looking at going to the lead super major now, so we'll kind of see how maybe that shakes out if I want to make any changes to this list or not. But yeah, what do you think about it, Brian?
I've always been a big fan of the 20-man Jackal with the Demon Prince standing behind it. There are now more than a few missions that are giving us access to the rule to give Go to Ground and Heroic Interventions free. Just make them free. So everybody's a lusty mo. And we also get Rotate Jackal Ion Shields just on demand. So take that. Demon Prince nerf basically doesn't exist. Same thing with your Berserkers. Like your Berserkers can just go to ground for free. You don't have to worry about like, oh, does that
Yeah,
like
which is like functionally AOC in a lot of the time, right? You know?
potentially even better? Like it's
Yeah.
just 4-up invuln, like getting shot by Meltas, and you're like, I'm just gonna go to ground for free.
Yeah. And I
That's really
honestly did find at Bristol, there was more than a few occasions where my head was just like, if there was a Demon Prince right here, this would be a better situation than what it is. I didn't think I would miss him as much as I did. I'm not gonna lie. I was kind of like, was quite
and
surprised.
I still miss mine too. I'll find a way to bring him back.
Yeah.
It's not clicking with me for a Prince plus Angron build just yet. I think I was off
I
again by
like the
5
Prince
points.
for those long actions, the actions that persist through your opponent's
Yes.
turn. Because with the helm, it's kind of like, oh man, I gotta kill that thing, and it's not
And I,
going to be easy. It takes a lot of heat off your army.
and I think it's more annoying to just put a 10-man Jackal next to him, rotate Jackal shields, and you have a 4-up invuln 10-man squad just sitting there, and it will take your opponent so much effort to remove that 10-man that you're just going to be so far ahead on tempo just because they're going to waste so many resources killing your trash to stop you from terraforming or doing something small, or you just get it for free. Like the alternative is either you dedicate everything to kill this one little Jackal squad, or I just get what I want, which is a horrible dilemma to be in for your opponent.
Yeah, I do like it. I and also having run Non-Angron with 2 exalted 8-bound bricks before, oh, it feels good. Like it feels really good, you know, especially when you got the Prince nearby, just being like, these guys are going to be so annoying to remove from the board. Um, I like it. It's got 4 hammers, which is kind of like the number of hammer units that I like to have. It has a ton of scoring. It's got the Prince for being obnoxious, and yeah, it's just going to be fun. I'm going to see how it does in a lot of practice games. I've got 2 practice games over the course of the weekend and Monday, and then yeah, we'll move on and see what it does from there. So I'm pretty interested to see how both of our lists kind of do in the wild in this new, very exciting meta. But we are going to kind of wrap this one up around now. It's just a quick update on where we think the world leaders are at. Nice little snappy video. But what we are very curious about is how you folks are kind of adapting to Pariah. Have you made any crazy changes to your lists? If you have, hop into our Discord or comment down below. Let us know about your interesting changes. We would love to hear them and chat about them with you. If you want to support the channel further and help us go to more events so that we can get more tournament reports out to you, consider subscribing to our Patreon, which will give you access to the Patreon competitive Discord, which is where you will see all the steps before we get to me arriving at these lists, which is generally like an insane man trying to pull together a lot of different jigsaw
Oh,
pieces in ways that don't make sense.
oh yeah, and even getting to where I got to, I think I pulled Dara in when I was talking about this. I wasn't even thinking about this list for 2 seconds. Like Dara definitely helped me get there. It was definitely a lot of scrambled thoughts coming together with bloodletters and random like solo characters, and I was like, wait a minute, I could just do this, and Dara helped confirm that. So if you just want to be entertained by like the most nonsensical, like we think of everything, like no
Yeah,
turn, no
we
no
don't leave
stone.
anything out.
No, there's no stone unturned. We will go through the entire roster and
Yeah.
try to argue for it, and usually get yelled at for a month, play it, lose with it, and be like, okay, maybe you were right.
Yeah, but
We
sometimes
try
we're
everything.
right, and a lot of the time with Non-Angron, life has been good, and Non-Angron expands your horizons. So you'll only get all that good stuff if you join the Patreon chat. Of course, you can hop into our Discord as normal and just catch us hanging out in there. But if you want the most focused version, it's Patreon is the way to go. But for now, that is going to be it for this video. We've got a lot more Pariah stuff coming up. We're going to have a stats review of the last meta as well coming up later this week. And we will have a review of the Pariah Tournament Companion Pack coming out next week as well. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that stuff. But for now, I've been Dara. This has been Brian. And until the next video, folks, you stay healthy, stay safe, and kill, maim, burn.